open eyes, open ears, and shut your mouth. I mean, basically listen, absorb as much as you can about that industry, especially if it's a new industry. Go try and talk to folks that have been there before. Especially if you're going into a new venture and you have that, you're an entrepreneur and maybe you haven't done this before, is be a sponge, absorb as much as you can. Talk to people, read, listen, podcasts now, webinars, and we've got all these great sources of information that are there for the absorbing.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, a serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as a founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where he helps startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. If you ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat. We're always here to help. Now, today we have another great guest on the podcast, Eric Layland. And Eric in high school did junior achievement and started. That's where he really started with a business. He did a small business and had to sell something, and from there went to college and was actually helped mentor others as far as startups go, and doing that, and then graduated and went to look for a job. I didn't want to feel like he was a cog in the machine, so took a business development position for a small business doing electronic sales. And just around there was the time the internet was emerging. And so ever since then, he left that job and identified what was gaining prominence and in the market on the internet, and started a few different companies along those lines, including a cannabis company, which we'll, I'm sure, get into a bit more. And then from there got into digital marketing. So experimented a lot and found that was enjoyable and liked it. And from there is continuing to build that out, as well as doing a bit of doing things in the consulting realm. So with that much as introduction, hopefully mostly accurate, if not all accurate, welcome on the podcast, Eric.
All right. Yeah, thank you, Devin. Thanks for having me, and glad to be here.
Absolutely excited to have you on. So I just took a much longer journey and condensed it in the 30-second version. So let's unpack that a bit. So tell us a little bit about how things got started for you as a junior achievement in high school.
Yeah, to be honest, back in high school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and honestly didn't have a whole lot of vision beyond finishing high school. That was about it. But I got introduced, I think it was probably my senior year, to Junior Achievement, which is a business mentoring type of program where you have a local executive gets a bunch of kids, kind of organizes us. I'm sure it was probably beyond like herding cats, but we get a basic little product or program to sell, and we put it together, put the marketing and the sales and the promotion and kind of the operation together. It usually lasts about a semester or so, and I just kind of got captivated by it. And so after graduating from college, going down to San Diego State to get into their business school, I kind of started in the finance side of the business program and curriculum there. Found out that I maybe wasn't the best math whiz that I thought I was, and said, finance, maybe that's not for me, but I like marketing. And so went on the marketing track and graduated from San Diego State there with my BS in marketing, and kind of was like, again, in a little bit of a what do I do now kind of mindset. And so I figured, well, I was down in San Diego. I said, this was the early 90s. And so I was very much into the music at that time. And if any of the oldsters out there know what was going on in the 90s, it was basically the peak of the Seattle music scene. So I had a girlfriend up here who was now my wife some time ago. And I said, well, San Diego's nice, but I'm out for venturing somewhere else. So moved up to Seattle. Basically emptied my bank account and everything that would fit in my car. And
one question, just the question on that, and I know I'm interrupting the journey, so I try not to do so, but what was the genesis for saying, hey, I'm up for something else? I mean, was it just, hey, this job sucks, I don't want to do it anymore, I want to go do something else, anything else sounds good, which I know people that have been there, and I've been there myself. Was there a different genesis of, hey, job was changing? Or usually there's something that there's a genesis or triggers wanting to make that change, and so just curious what that was.
Yeah, well, so around 91, we were in the middle of a pretty deep recession. Probably a lot of people don't remember that one, but there weren't honestly a lot of good job prospects in San Diego. San Diego was a major military town at the time, still is to a large extent. And it was just not a good economy. So I didn't sense that I had a lot of prospects there in Southern California. And given that my girlfriend was up in Seattle, and the music scene was hopping along, I said, well, what do I have to lose? A change of environment, a change of atmosphere, and yeah, I kind of have always had a mindset of I'll figure it out. It's nothing is that hard. I believe that you can't, with some logic, some reasoning, asking folks questions, getting some local insights, you can't find, I think you can find your way. And so I just said, you know what? Hey, Danielle, my my significant other now, I said, do you mind if I move up there? And she was like, sure, that's fine. And
It sounds like an adventure.
yeah, it's that easy. So yeah, fast forward quite a few years. I can't keep track now. But no, it was just really wanting to change my environment. I had been a California kid. First 10 years, 11 years of my life was in Northern California, moved down to Southern California, did the San Diego State thing. I did not go on the 4-year track. I kind of bounced around a little bit. I was more on the 5.5-year plan because a lot of times I was just trying to figure out, like, what the heck do I want to do? And so I just, I felt that Seattle was someplace where I could kind of, in a way, I didn't necessarily think about it then as I do now, but it was a way to kind of start over in a bit, sort of reset and find my way. And so when I moved up to Seattle, I had nothing. I mean, I had $400 in my account. I had an old beat up Volvo, and whatever I could carry was what I brought up. And that was it. I had a landing pad though. I had a place to stay for a few weeks. And so I moved in with her. We ended up finding a place about a month or so later and just kind of hit the pavement. And I did think that what I would do first would be, let me find some type of role that's going to push me to learn as much as possible and be a little bit uncomfortable. And so I've naturally been more on the shyer side of things. I wasn't really an outspoken person as a younger guy, just kind of, kept quiet, sat in the back of the class, not the greatest student, but was there. But I took a role in it actually was a public company and is now part of a conglomerate. They're called a Fluke. And what they do is they manufacture very precise, expensive, complex electronic test equipment. And so I found myself in a sales role that I had never sold really anything before in that traditional sales role. And my responsibility was to go out and basically knock on the doors of some of the largest manufacturing companies in the world, at least along the West Coast. And so we're talking about places like Boeing, Lockheed Martin, military installations, large corporate America businesses. And I had to figure out real quick, how am I going to get these folks, if I knock on the door, how am I going to get them to answer? And so that kind of really pushed me beyond kind of my comfort zone. But what I had to do was learn the language of electrical engineering and manufacturing. And so that's what I did, is just I buried myself into, back in the day, before this was pre-internet. So our product catalog was about 400 pages, and it had a lot of engineering and technical jargon in it. And I just poured myself into every night. I would just read as much as I could. And then on the weekends, I went to the University of Washington's engineering library and just read more. And that's what I did for 3 years.
So now, and you do that, you study, you're coming up to speed, you're figuring those things out. Now, one of the things I think we talked about before is that, now the internet comes along and it seemed to change things a bit for you or put you on a different trajectory as far as kind of where you wanted to take your career, what you might be doing. So maybe share a little bit about kind of how the internet changed your journey a bit.
Yeah, so this was probably 92, 93. I had been at Fluke for a little while, and they came out with a product called a network tester. And so this was testing different internet protocols, different packet testers, often what it would be called. And that was my first exposure to the internet. This was really more when it was just a text-based communication network between universities, government organizations, some corporate stuff, but this was pre-browser, really pre-internet. This was more like text messaging. And so I saw that was a way for people to communicate bidirectionally. And as things started to kind of emerge as, okay, wow, there's a way to interact with people across the globe. This isn't a telephone. This is something different. It's not only my voice, but I can send information. And just dots started to connect in my mind. And I think because I was exposed to both technology, I was exposed to the internet at the very early stages, and some of these larger corporations and what they were doing, and what my role was to often sell equipment that went into the development of other products. So I was often talking to R&D guys and women in the engineering space. And so I got kind of a wind of what was happening, what was going to be coming along down the pike. And then when Seattle really started to pop in the internet .com era, was kind of about 94, probably 95, 96. And I had been at Fluke for 3 years, and I just said, hey, I want to show how we can sell and market by utilizing this thing called the internet. And I did a mock-up of a website. Nobody had websites at the time. This was just like hand-coded HTML, and just kind of showed my sales manager, hey, I think we could do this and it would be beneficial and valuable. And he came back to me and said, you got a quota to hit, just focus on selling. I heard that and I knew I got to get out of here. That's it. Not to mention that I had an hour commute each way every day. And I was like, okay, if I can get rid of that and I can work downtown and find some of these cool companies that seem to be doing interesting things, I'm all in. And so that's what I did.
Now, easier said than done. I understand the easier part, or easy in quotes, to say I'm out, and hey, I get that. You're saying, I think this is a great opportunity. Why wouldn't you do it? Forward thinking, and you're saying, they say, nope, no, thank you. Just hit your sales quota. You're saying that's not going to be the long-term career that I'm wanting. Way different context. That's what I found out with working for big law and big law firms is, hey, that's just not going to be me. There's a lot of people it suits very well, nothing knocking it against them, but I'm saying I want to be able to run my own thing, do my own thing, and or set my own direction, which big law firms just aren't going to be able to accommodate. So definitely get that. But now, as you're saying I'm out, now where did you go from there? What did you start doing, or kind of what was that next stage or next stepping stone?
Well, it was funny. I saved it to this day, but this was back in the fall of 96. And there was this company starting in downtown Seattle. It's called Amazon. And I thought, that's kind of interesting. I mean, they're selling books, and I was a pretty big book reader. I kind of like what they're doing. So I submitted my resume, and I got this card back. Again, I'm dating myself. They don't do this anymore, but there's a little postcard that says, thank you for submitting your resume to Amazon. We expect 1997 is going to be a big year. We're going to keep your resume on file, and we'll give you a call when we're ready. Like, okay, well, that's all right, but I kind of need a job now. So unfortunately, Amazon didn't happen, but I did join up with a small .com that was just starting. I think I was the 8th or 9th person hired. And what we were doing then was generating leads for advertisers. And at the time, our big channels were CompuServe, MSN, when it was a proprietary walled garden kind of network, and AOL. There was this other thing on the side called the web that we were just kind of playing around with. It was really, we weren't sure what was happening. Thought CompuServe and AOL, that's going to be where the money's going to be made. Well, obviously that turned around a little bit and the web took off. And what I realize now in retrospect is that we were probably one of the first, if not the first, direct marketing lead generation firm in the country, developing leads. And what we would do is I'd go in, eventually my role became to acquire traffic, turn that traffic, monetize it by putting the right offer in front of that individual based upon their background, what they were interested in. The website merchandised all these different types of offers. But what I learned quickly was what became kind of the fundamentals of digital marketing and conversion optimization back in 90s, 5, 6, 7. Also at that time, which impacted my further entrepreneurial pursuits, was I got introduced to pay-per-click marketing long before Google. This was there was a company way back in the day. They became Yahoo Search, but they were originally called Overture, and it was buy a visitor for a penny or two, and then we would monetize them and to sell that interest of the visitor back to the client for like $1. So although it cost us $2 or excuse me, 2 cents, and maybe throw another nickel in for overhead, but then we were able to make a huge margin on that. And that was something that has always stuck with me, is to how do you add value to something and then be able to turn that value and sell it back to an interested party and be able to make your margin and enough to continue to grow that business and reinvest in it. That particular company did go public, but like many companies at the time, it also tanked in the kind of the .com era. But again, there was a ton of learnings, and that was kind of what I kind of used that .com experience as my MBA, because we did everything. Like if the trash needed to be taken out, hey, somebody does it. If somebody needs to run a report, you do it.
Now, one question, and I think that I've got an MBA, and I always laugh because I always usually say about half my classes are fluffy or useless, and the other half were good. But I think there's certainly a MBA of hard knocks, or one that there is a much different when you get out in the business arena and you actually have to implement it. There's a lot of lessons learned that are great that you really can't learn in school, and so I definitely get treating that as an MBA, and it's a great insight. So now with all of that, and I think maybe just fast forwarding a bit on your journey, but throughout all of that, you tried a few different businesses, and we're kind of continuing to be enthralled with the internet. Now, how did that get you into digital marketing, or what was the journey to get you to there?
Well, even back then in the mid to late 90s, there was always a side hustle. So my side hustle at the time was I really enjoyed mountain biking. So I got a group of friends. We started a mountain biking website that was originally just trails up here in the Seattle area. We connected with a bike shop and started to sell their products through our website. So again, a lot of this stuff there wasn't some big grand master plan. It was, hey, there's something over there that looks like it might fit with something over here. So let's put it together and see if it fits. And so basically what we did in retrospect was we were using user-generated content. We were building a community. So people would do trail reviews and gear reviews, and then we would sell different, from our buddy's bike shop, be able to sell their inventory. And, everything started to snowball and build on itself. So I'd take a learning and then turn that into something else. You learn more, turn that into something else. And after the .com crashed, the bike deal was something that just wasn't paying the bills. So it was more of a hobby type of thing. So that's when I joined with one of my former coworkers, and we started what was, at least in the Seattle area at the time, this was 2000, a paid search marketing program or agency. And so we started that. I was there for about 6 years, grew that to be a pretty significant operation here in the Seattle area. Had a falling out with my business partner. That was about the time of the second recession that my professional career went through, the Great Recession of, was it 2007, 2008, and end up having to hang out my solo shingle, as they say. And, at the time, it's like, well, this was one instance where I didn't take a past experience and spin it into something new. I said, hey, I was a partner in building an agency. I need to kind of turn this into revenue fairly quick. So I'm just going to go out and do that again, but with a slightly different angle, a little bit more focused on the analytics side of things. And in, 2009, 2010, still analytics and digital marketing. I mean, it was getting momentum, but it was not nearly as it is today. And there was still, more often than not, websites that did not have, say, Google Analytics installed. And so what's kind of been my underlying motivation is how do you, when a technology comes into a market and starts to disrupt things, how can I help those that need to be in that market take better advantage of the situation? And so that was started with digital marketing, helping get companies on board, understand what was happening in the audience, how you could get your offer in front of somebody at the right time. And then that translated into a digital agency. And then that's just kind of continued to snowball, and kind of now where I'm at, oh gosh, what is it, 25, 26 years later, is really focusing on the AI space, and how does AI and machine learning, how can that be deployed to help marketers, and that this is my area of expertise, help marketers and their media connect even more efficiently with an audience, truly understand what are the motivations of the audience. It's not just the best price or what have you, but trying to figure out what causes somebody to choose one brand over another, and then how do you work with those brands to make sure that that message is going to that right audience at the right time, so that their opportunity to generate revenue or acquire a customer is maximized. And so that's kind of where I've ended up now, 26 years later, from kind of the dawn of the internet, going through a bunch of trials and tribulations and making mistakes, and having to kind of figure out things on the fly. Now I think I've found my sweet spot, and as I kind of enter into probably the last 10 years of my work life, I think it's in a good space. I mean, there's still a lot of interesting aspects. I work with startups, I work with big companies. I try and help them get on track and make the most of the data that their operations are generating.
That's awesome. No, that's exciting, and it's definitely a fun journey to see what brought you over to digital marketing, and kind of brought you where you're at today. And so, with that, as that kind of catches us up now to where you're at today, and where the present day is with your journey, always a great time to ask two questions I ask at the end of each episode. So we'll jump to those now. So the first question I always ask is, along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made? What'd you learn from it?
This might come across more negatively than it is, but along the way, and you had mentioned it in the intro, we jumped really aggressively into the cannabis space in the Washington State area right as it went legal. This was like within 12 months of legalization passing. I was trying to think about, okay, there's no market here, or there's no blueprint, I should say, for how a business in this space is run. Overnight, people have gone from an illegal practice to a legal practice, in a sense. And a lot of these folks that I talk to them, they say, hey, I've never had to advertise. My product is my advertising. I don't need to do this. But what I understood was that eventually cannabis is a commodity product. Regardless of what you think about it, at the end of the day, it is a raw material that gets transformed into another product form, and then becomes a product which is in merchandise and sold. But it at its core is a commodity. So what that tells me is that, like other plant and commodity-based products, what I use often is the consumer packaged goods model. You're going to need to develop what your brand stands for. And it's not a logo, it's not a tagline. What a brand is, and there's a lot of misinformation out there, but it's basically, what I like to say is, a brand is the sum of all the various touch points and all the various value that comes with each touch points along the way. And when you aggregate that, that is the brand. The brand stands for something. It's not, again, not a logo, not a tagline, but it's almost a position or philosophy. And a brand attracts customers and consumers that are aligned with those values. So what I thought was, what would be real easy is like, hey, we're going to go into the cannabis market. We're going to show them how marketing's done, and they'll just flock to us. That did not happen. The cannabis space is very much driven by culture. And if you're not, at least in the early days, and this was, again, 2-3 years after legalization, so another 6 months before the market was even operationalized and people were making any money, but it was also very guarded. I mean, there was, for, I don't know, 20, 30 years, this war on drugs had people serving time, life sentences even, for something that was now legal. And so there was a lot of apprehension in talking to a business that wanted to help bring notoriety to them. And a lot of stunts, some people didn't want notoriety. They just wanted to do their thing in the shadows. So
Oh, no, go ahead.
yeah, so that was, one thing that I made a miscalculation in. I thought that it was sort of this, if you build it, they will come. And that didn't happen.
No, and I think that I think a lot of people do think that if you build it, you kind of have that mentality. If you build it, then it'll be such a great product. Yes, everybody else needs marketing, but if it'll be such a great product and so needed that everybody will just simply come or rush to buy your product. And you can build a really great product. And there are a lot of them out there. And yet if nobody knows about them, if they're not aware of it, it doesn't matter how it is. And if you build it, they won't come if they don't know, have directions on how to get there. So I think that that's a great takeaway. Second question I always ask is, if you're talking to somebody that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what'd be the one piece of advice you'd give them?
Open eyes, open ears, and shut your mouth. I mean, basically listen, absorb as much as you can about that industry, especially if it's a new industry. Go try and talk to folks that have been there before. I think one of the things, I got a little bit comfortable kind of jumping before, like, what is it? Look before you leap. I was leaping into things. And I had some degree of success, but I think that cannabis experience was kind of the eye opener, where I just jumped in and I didn't really have a good plan to follow through and turn it into what it I still believe can it be, but I just was not as open-minded to learning at that point, which is actually counter to my earlier experiences, where I went in trying to educate myself first, not talking about what I thought, but listening to what others were saying and their experiences first. And so I think I would say that, especially if you're going into a new venture and you have that, you're an entrepreneur and maybe you haven't done this before, is be a sponge, absorb as much as you can. Talk to people, read, listen, podcasts now, webinars, and we've got all these great sources of information that are there for the absorbing, but really, do your homework first. You can't get caught up in the paralysis by analysis or analysis, but you do have to make a jump at some point, but do so, educate yourself first, know what the likely outcomes are. And if you start to see one of those outcomes becoming true, know what your next step is going to be before you actually have to take it.
Perfect. No, I think that's definitely a great takeaway. So, well, as we now wrap up the episode, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, or find out more?
Well, my email is Eric L, that's ERICL at thematters.group. And that's not a .com, but it is a .group. And also you can find our website is thematters.group website. And I think, I like to clarify for folks that, they think, oh, you're digital marketing. Yes, but we really do focus on the analytical side of digital marketing. So understanding what your media is returning in terms of ROI. Something we don't do as much as we used to do in my past, where, sort of standalone things like SEO, paid search, and websites. That's all great. But what we want to do is talk to a client and say, here's your digital landscape. Now let's collect the pieces, put them together, and make sure we understand as best as we can what the data that's being generated from this operation, what is it telling you? What can we uncover so that you can reinvest in your business?
Absolutely. And sounds like definitely a great service offering. And for all those that are in need and looking for that analytics side of the marketing, definitely reach out via email and get things kicked off. And so, yeah. With that, now as we wrap up, thank you again for coming on the podcast. It's been it's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you the listeners, if you have your own journey to tell and you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, we'd love to have you. So just go to inventiveguest.com, apply to be on the show. A couple more things as listeners, make sure to click subscribe, share, leave us a review, because we want to make sure that everyone finds out about all these awesome episodes. And last but not least, if you ever need help with your patents or trademarks or anything else with your startup or small business, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Well, thank you again for coming on the podcast. It's been fun. It's been a pleasure, and wish you the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
All right.